Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
The original architect of Universal Credit, Ian Duncan Smith, has called on the Prime Minister to use this month's budget to add £2 billion in funding to ensure the welfare system is fit for purpose. It comes after former Prime Minister John Major warned that Universal Credit could become this government's poll tax if changes aren't made to address the system's unfairness. Sky's Mike McCarthy has this report.
They don't have to wait for Universal Credit in Oldham, it's already here. The town was one of the pilot areas for the new welfare system. Claimant Jodie O'Neill is unemployed, but has been trying to raise a few pounds at the Sunday market stall by selling off personal possessions.
My kids have used some of these things, you know, growing up. It's heartbreaking.
How would you describe your life?
Without swearing, horrible.
Because?
Because I can't meet my basic needs. Not on this Universal Credit, I can't anyway.
The architect of Universal Credit, former Work and Pension Secretary Ian Duncan Smith, promised 8 years ago that the new flagship policy would bring simplicity and encourage independence.
This Conservative-led government now has concern for the poor running through its DNA.
Now he's joined those warning what will happen if the government doesn't finance it properly.
The government has a really, really transformative policy on its hands. You do not underfund it as it goes in, because if you do that, then what you do is lose the great benefit of it.
Universal Credit is a single monthly payment for people out of work or on a low income. It'll replace 6 existing benefits. Claimants have to sign up for it online, and it can take up to 5 weeks to receive the first payment. That's made directly into a bank account in a monthly lump sum. It's up to the applicant to budget for food and accommodation, and it's their responsibility to pay the landlord directly. There's no limit on how much you can work on Universal Credit. Instead, the amount received will reduce gradually as you earn more. Labour say it's more like a punishment than a benefit.
It's being used to cut people's benefits, to penalise people for having too many children, to penalise the disabled and other vulnerable people. So the notion of a simpler benefit system, great idea, but not if you're adding austerity to it.
The best test of Britain's new social safety net will be not only in places such as this, where poverty and deprivation are at their worst, but also in areas where people are just about managing to keep their heads above water. Mike McCarthy, Sky News, Oldham.
Let's talk about the gig economy, talk about turning a corner there. James Bloodworth has written a book. Let's show you the front page there, or the cover, I should say. James Bloodworth Hard. Tell us what you did.
So back in 2016, I travelled around the country for 6 months, taking on a series of precarious, low-paid jobs. And the aim was really to kind of shine a light on a kind of world which is all too easy to ignore. So as a journalist working in London, you know, I didn't necessarily. I felt like I wanted to do some belly-to-earth reporting, as it were, and put some kind of, you know, you read the statistics, the employment statistics each month, but I actually wanted to see what it was like to live and work in some of those, you know, zero-hour contract jobs, low-pay economy jobs. And what did you discover? Lots of things, really. I mean, the Amazon stuff, I discovered a world working in Amazon warehouses where you were given disciplinaries for taking days off sick, for taking too long using the bathroom, where you had communities where you'd had, you know, 20 years ago you'd had industries, you know, coal mining, power stations, steelworks, and the jobs that had replaced them were precarious, temporary jobs where it wasn't just the material poverty, but the jobs lacked a lot of the dignity and self-respect that the old industrial jobs had imparted on people. And it was essentially not just the material poverty of these jobs, but yeah, this sense that people didn't know whether they were coming or going from one day to the next. You couldn't support a family on the money you were taking home. You couldn't get a mortgage on the kind of contracts you were getting in these jobs.
Right. What's your response? Because the gig economy has also been lauded with giving flexibility to many workers, also allowing people to have perhaps 1 or 2 jobs, concentrate on what they really want to do. You know,
I don't think working down a coal mine was a whole bundle of fun.
No,
I think that was a pretty hard, brutal, unpleasant job that was probably pretty bad for your health. So I don't think the glory days, I think we're in danger of looking back to the rose-tinted days of working at a coal mine as opposed to working in an Amazon warehouse.
Or you could join a trade union and take a day off sick without being fired for it. So
I think there's a couple of things here. First of all, just because you start in a relatively poor quality job doesn't mean you are stuck there forever. The attempt is to move upwards.
The figures suggest that it does mean that you're stuck there.
Yeah, I mean, and then the other thing is, you know, we've seen Amazon increase the wages, and I think the problem is that the laws are not being enforced. You know, we do have legal protection, but the trouble is if you're just one individual and trying to fight a business and a company which you know is not doing British law is very difficult to do.
And we're back to the issue of trade unions, really, aren't we? Or organising yourself in order to be strong enough to argue against very big employers. The fact is that the economy is changing, the kind of rise of the gig economy, people who are bogusly self-employed, which costs us all an awful lot of money in the country because they're not really self-employed. And I think we need to update the law. That's why I think it's really important that the government come back with their response to the Taylor Review, which looked at this. BT, as of next March, are going to abolish agency contracts, payment between assignment contracts, and it's going to lead to thousands of people earning more money to do the same job that they're currently doing. So I think it beholds on every government and every politician to try and stay up with the economy and to bring in laws that do protect people and allow people to go to work to be able to support their families, pay their rent, pay their mortgage, and that's not where we are now.
I did check the data before coming in, and only 2.3% of the labour force are on 0-hours contracts.
But what about the gig economy more broadly?
900,000 people.
I think, brave of you, by the way, to attack Amazon, given that you've got a book out.
Well, I mean, this is the problem we face. As a writer as well, they've taken over the book trade, yes. so we have no choice but to sell books through them as well.
And I've got a statement from Amazon in a moment.
Okay. I think that James's book is about a broader problem, which is that white working-class young men feel increasingly left behind. So if you look at the white working-class boys from poor backgrounds, that's the lowest achieving demographic when it comes to GCSEs. They're least likely to go to university. People from black, Asian and minority ethnic backgrounds are much more likely now to go to university than people from white working-class backgrounds. And I think they're constantly told that masculinity is something toxic, that they're privileged in virtue of being white, even if they're at the bottom of the socio-economic ladder. And the problem with this is it's driving them into the arms of organisations like the English Defence.
But is that the problem? But how do you then deal with, I mean, you mentioned the English Defence League, but how do you deal with companies making sure they don't exploit workers from whatever background they come?
I think it's very difficult because the problem is that if you insist on raising the minimum wage or the London living wage above what it is at the moment, then the companies might easily relocate, smaller companies might go out of business.
And that means more regulations, fewer jobs, more unemployment.
But that was the argument against introducing the minimum wage back in 1997. Do you remember we were told that millions of jobs were going to go? That didn't happen.
And those were benign economic times, arguably.
Yeah, but the idea that somehow you can pay people next to nothing and they're going to be able to do the jobs and survive, at that point the taxpayer has to come in, which is why we're into the argument about universal credit. So either wages have to increase and people can afford to live,
but successive Conservative governments have increased the minimum wage over and above.
If you can't pay someone enough to live, then it's not a viable business. I mean, you can't.
It's a viable business. It's not viable for the employees.
Uber, for example, is you've got something where the whole thing is just a ruse to offload risk onto drivers and the taxpayer. Yeah. So when people are taking time off sick, they're going onto housing benefit. Taxpayers picking up the tab.
What it's costing.
And I'm going to allow you all to continue this conversation since we've just about run out of time. That's it from us on Politics Live. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.